Good. Yeah. Are we supposed to wear the mask?
I think when they're talking again.
Nico has it off.
Right that way.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you all to this side event of the UNFCCC Secretariat. I am Nicholas Müller. The topic of this side event is supporting countries in a consideration and adoption of carbon pricing, the CI-ACA experience. I support the CI-ACA project, which stands for Collaborative Instruments for Ambitious Climate Action. With this side event, we want to take a closer look at the experience with the consideration and adoption of carbon pricing in developing countries. In 2016, carbon pricing covered just 13% of global greenhouse gases emissions. But in 2021, this share stands already at 21.5%. And much of this growth was the result of an increasing number of developing countries adopting carbon pricing, and this trend is expected to continue. When the CI-ACA project was launched at COP22 in Marrakesh, the idea was very simple. Carbon pricing is one important tool, one important policy tool for decarbonization. And with the Paris Agreement adopted, a growing range of parties would need to enhance their mitigation policies to achieve the NDCs, their nationally determined contributions, but also their low-emission development strategies. But most developing countries interested in considering and adopting carbon pricing would need support. And in fact, as most of you know, the Paris Agreement calls on developed parties to provide support to developing countries. To cover this topic, we have with us today a diverse set of experts ranging from national policy experts, senior policy experts from donor countries, climate negotiators, but also team leads and coordinators working with a network of regional collaboration centers, working on the ground to coordinate the support delivered to parties. Without waiting any further, allow me to introduce our presenters and panelists for today's event. On behalf of James Grabert, we have Masamba Tioy. Masamba is manager in the mitigation division of the UNFCCC Secretariat and is leading the development of incentive mechanisms for climate action and regulations pertaining to measurement of climate outcomes. He is also overseeing the support to enhance climate action by the financial sector, as well as increased access to low capital cost for clean investment in developing countries. As co-chair of the Climate Change Coalition, a coalition of more than 200 organizations, and member of the advisory board of INAPTA, the International Association for Trusted Blockchain Applications, he's working on DLT use cases for climate and sustainability action. He also co-chaired the development of ISO 14097 framework and principles for assessing and reporting investment and financing activities related to climate change. With the UNFCCC Secretariat, Masamba Tioy is leading the work on the application of disruptive technologies to climate and sustainability action. He has initiated the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub and is leading its development as project executive. Masamba graduated process engineer and has a PhD on energy systems. He published several articles in technical peer-reviewed journal and was awarded Best Scientist in Senegal by the Senegalese president in '97. Then we have also with us Thomas Ford. Sorry, just arrived. Thomas studied political science, economics, and sociology at the University of Duisburg and Bielefeld. Between '86 and '93, he worked as research assistant at the faculties of economics and social science at the University of Duisburg. Between '93 and 2022, Thomas worked for the Ministry of Environment, initially on environmental and energy issues in Central and Eastern European states. In '99, he took over the responsibility for the Joint Implementation Coordination Office. Some of you may remember as JICO, later renamed as Coordination Office Market Mechanisms, which focused on the various carbon markets agenda points under the UNFCCC, as well as on Germany's bilateral and multilateral implementation activities and programs for the international carbon markets. Recently, he changed to the new Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate Action, Bmwk, with the same set of responsibilities, including now the strategic challenge to enable Article 6 for the use of climate finance. Thomas Ford is a member of the German UNFCCC delegation and chairs the collegiate board of the Foundation Future for Carbon Market, which is actual activities supports the transition of programmatic approach of the CDM to the Article 6. Also with us, we have Hadika Jamshaid. As climate change specialist, Hadika is supporting the Ministry of Climate Change, Government of Pakistan, localizing carbon market tools for building climate resilience infrastructure for achieving the nationally determined contribution. Hadika holds a degree in economic as well as a master's degree in political analysis and public policy. With us, we also have the pleasure to have Hadji Mbaye DIAGNE. Mr. Diagne is an engineer, senior consultant, and former president of COMNAC, which is the Senegalese National Board on Climate Change. He's a member of the Senegalese official delegation for the UNFCCC negotiations since 2000, and he's the lead coordinator for all mitigation and market issue and supports many UNFCCC negotiating groups, including the African Group of Negotiators, where he's the lead coordinator, the G77 and China as lead coordinator, and least developing countries group on issues related to carbon markets, currently KP mechanism and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Mr. Diagne is a lead author for Chapter 16, Innovation, Technology, Development and Transfer of the IPCC 6 Assessment Report, AR6, and Mr. Diagne coordinated the GHG inventories for the second and third national communication of the Republic of Senegal, as well as the mitigation component of the Senegalese NDC under the Paris Agreement, including the MRV component and potential carbon pricing. Mr. Diagne is a member of the CDM Executive Board. He was its chair in 2020 and chair of the methodology panel of the CDM. He is also a member of many working groups set up by the World Bank on the carbon market and the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. With us, we will also have Mr. Kishan Kumarsingh. Kishan has been Trinidad and Tobago's lead technical negotiator on climate change for the past 25 years. He has held many international positions in the UN climate negotiations, inter alia as chair of the expert group on technology transfer, the chair of the subsidiary body on scientific and technological advice, and the co-chair of negotiations of the Paris Agreement. He has been recently appointed as the co-chair of the work program on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change by His Excellency Alok Sharma, President of the 26th Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC. The negotiations will serve to shape international regime for international climate finance for developing countries. And nationally, he has been instrumental in defining environmental and climate policy for Trinidad and Tobago, including authoring and coordinating the finalization of the national climate change policy, Trinidad and Tobago's nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, conceptualizing and contributing to the development of a just transition of the workforce policy and e-mobility policy to create the enabling environment for the energy transition away from fossil fuels. Also with us, we have Bianca Changi. Bianca is the coordinator for the East African Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance. She is responsible for the management of Alliance activities and the strategic development of the Alliance. She has experience on matters related to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and provided technical support in this area to Alliance members. Her experience extends to carbon pricing, monitoring, reporting, and verification of carbon market projects, and in facilitating climate finance trainings. And as panelist today with us is also Mubarak Mukaila. Mubarak has been working for BOAD since 2008, after working closely to BOAD President Personal Assistant for 3 years and launching the BOAD Carbon Initiative in 2008. He worked in the Finance Engineering Department and mobilized resources for large-scale projects across the West African Economic and Monetary Union region. In 2014, he joined the Regional Collaboration Center, Lomé, to help the team in the effort to assist BOAD to mobilize more efficient financing for projects in the region. He is now the Regional Coordinator of RCC Lomé, where he is working closely with the BOAD to develop tools and instruments for the financing of NDCs and Sustainable Development Goals. He is also the director of the West Africa Alliance on Climate Finance and Carbon Market Projects. Mubarak Mukaila is a graduate of Boston University in Finance. Now, without further waiting, let me hand over to Masamba Tioy, Manager in a Mitigation Division, who is going to open with his keynote speech on behalf of our director, Mr. James Grabert. Masamba, over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen in the room. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those that are participating virtually. I'm really pleased to open this side event on supporting countries in considering and adopting carbon pricing, the experience under the collaborative instrument for ambitious climate action, CI-ACA. I thank our keynote speaker, our presenter, and our panelists for having accepted to contribute to this side event. So as you all know, we have a very challenging task ahead of us, which is to achieve the net zero by 2050. To keep the global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, GHG emission need to be half by 2030 compared to their level in 2010, and net zero need to be reached by 2050. Unfortunately, our current emission trajectory is not following that paceway. We are not yet on track. Global GHG emission in 2021 reached level higher than before the COVID-19 crisis, with an increase of emission arising from the combustion of coal. We need to reverse this trend. The global emission need to peak at the earliest and sharply decline to become net zero by 2050. The good news is that we have most of the technology required for the transition to net zero. The bad news is that this will not suffice. We will need to continue to innovate on technology. We will also need innovative policy instrument, innovative financial instrument, innovative business model, innovative cooperative approach, leadership, as well as social innovation for a net zero transition which provide flourishing life to 10 billion people by 2050, increase biodiversity, support regeneration without leaving anyone behind. One key priority regarding decarbonization is to put a price on the negative and positive externalities arising from our system of wealth production. Every ton of greenhouse gas released to the atmosphere has a cost on society, and every ton of greenhouse gas permanently removed from the atmosphere is a global public good. Therefore, it has a value. This is why more and more jurisdictions have adopted or are considering to adopt carbon pricing as one of their major climate change mitigation policies. By setting a price on carbon, countries contribute in making clear that their economic system will favor climate-friendly solutions. But for carbon pricing to have a significant impact, we need clear and ambitious commitment and the climate policies that support them, including carbon pricing to discourage emission-intensive infrastructure and encourage cleaner alternatives. A growing number of parties and subnationals have realized that they need the policy instrument for a successful implementation of their NDCs, longer-term low-emission development strategy, as well as locally determined contribution. Of course, carbon pricing is just one of the many instruments in the toolbox as policy instrument, but it is an important one. Many parties are watching with great attention how their trade partners are putting in place their own carbon pricing plan and considering domestic plan. So over the last 4 years, voices advocating a price on carbon have grown substantially stronger. Let me just quote some of them. From Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, I quote, "First, let's shift taxes from salary to carbon. We should tax pollution, not people." End of the quote. And Christine Lagarde, former Managing Director of IMF and currently leading the bank, European Bank for Investment, carbon pricing is the most effective policy for reducing emission. from Patricia Espinosa, Executive Secretary of UNFCCC. Putting a price on carbon is essential to meet the Paris Agreement and the global goals. And from Jose Angel Gurria, there can be no question that delivering on the promises of COP21 requires strengthening carbon pricing now. And finally, from the IPCC 1.5 degree special report, explicit carbon prices remain a necessary condition of ambitious climate policy. But it is not only thought leaders and political leaders who are advocating carbon pricing. The Climate Action 100 Plus, a group of over 450 global investors, representing roughly half of the world asset under management, as part of its declaration, call for an economically meaningful carbon price that help redirect investment. They want the policymakers to level the playing field and give clarity on where they should invest and where they should not, to avoid stranded asset. Many of these investors and major corporate already price carbon in their investment decision processes. This is what we call shadow carbon pricing. In terms of countries, especially developing countries, but also their states, provinces, and cities, we observe a net progression around carbon pricing. In developing countries, price is put on carbon in order to cut their emission. In developing countries, carbon pricing is more about preventing increase of emission that will go with the growth of their economy and pursuing a clean, resilient, and low carbon development trajectory. But each party has its own domestic circumstances. Parties may want to first know more about carbon pricing. They may want to assess whether carbon pricing could make sense in their national context. They may also want to explore what could be the best approach to price carbon in their own unique context. These are key questions around which the project Collaborative Instrument for Ambitious Climate Action, CI-ACA, support developing countries. And CI-ACA continue to identify and address the gap countries face in terms of carbon pricing-based policies. We will hear some examples today from national policy experts. We receive support from CI-ACA project. The CI-ACA project was launched at COP22 in Marrakesh with the objective to assist parties in the development of carbon pricing approaches for implementing their NDC under the Paris Agreement and foster collaboration. Over the years, the project has supported 12 parties and group of parties in 4 continents: Panama, the Dominican Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea and Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, Asian as a group of countries, a group of East African countries, and Pakistan. And over the coming years, the project intends to continue supporting parties and group of parties in establishing carbon pricing instrument for achieving their climate ambition. I hope that today's event will shed some light on what developing countries are doing in relation to carbon pricing and the help which can be provided. So before I close my intervention, and as we wrap up the second phase of the CI-ACA project, I would like to thank the donors which have made this project phase possible. the government of Germany, and the government of Quebec. I would also like to thank the Regional Collaboration Center, which implements the project on the ground and make it possible through their outreach to stakeholders. To all, I wish you an excellent and successful event. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Massamba, for introducing the topic and providing an overview of where we stand and for highlighting the importance of a price on carbon. Next, I would like to invite Thomas Ford from Bmwk, the new German Ministry for Economy and Climate Change. Thomas, over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good morning, good day, and good evening. As Massamba mentioned, that is a virtual event, so that's very important. Welcome all, and I have to thank that I can present here a little bit my experiences with CI-ACA and give also a little bit an overview on the support Germany is doing on the Article 6 capacity building and maybe a little bit more on the questions at what time this market will really will be reanimated comparable to the times under the Kyoto Protocol. So my experience is from the beginning with CI-ACA. As we started with CI-ACA, there was the hope that in addition to the World Bank facilities and other broader facilities, we see that the special focus of countries have been addressed, while other countries being interested have not the direct access because of the lack of capacity to formulate their needs in the form of carbon pricing, carbon market instruments, and therefore CI-ACA was very welcomed to broaden the participation of many countries more. Massamba has mentioned the country groups and the countries, and of course, if we have more money, we could address more countries. That's also clear, but I think it was a very good start, and what we have seen is that the question to put not only the new carbon market mechanism on the table, but also the carbon pricing instruments which could be used domestically is very important, because if you go for the international carbon markets, you have to fulfill all the requirements, even if your country is not in the position to do it directly. And carbon pricing could also be a way to address the salaries of people are involved. Let's say it just transition is necessary. That means also the pricing, which is necessary for certain activities, might be different, will be different, depending on the activity and on the social groups which are involved. Let's say that certain activities in local communities cannot have the same price level as in towns in metropolitan areas where you have comparable situation as in Europe or the US. So this is very important that CI-ACA can build on the variety of needs and the strategies found by the countries. And so far, as a donor country, I'm not involved in identifying these issues. Of course, we are considering the outcomes and are lucky when there is success, but it's country-driven and supported by the RCCs. And I think CI-ACA is one of the activities where you can have a proof that the regional collaboration centers are really necessary also for the future. That's a very important message. Massamba spoke about the future of CI-ACA. There is the idea to have a longer cooperation, and Germany has reserved its budget for this activity, but as we have changed our ministries with this activity, we have to go one and the other loop for getting the contract done, but we are under the way, and hopefully we do this in a very short time, but there is no question that we will be supportive of this thing. So this is one important point on CI-ACA. The second important point on CI-ACA is that it really helps also countries to get to other facilities or other cooperation schemes, so that it could be also considered as a preparation for facilities where they have to elaborate much more on certain activities which will be funded. So that's maybe the next step. This is not about CI-ACA, but maybe any other activity by developing banks. So that's also important that CI-ACA is successful in preparing countries to get better involved in the international sphere. That's a very important point, and I think we will see it in the clearness of Article 6, where the last implementation steps gets clear, so that the capacity building could become really on the operational side and not on the philosophy of what is the new aspect of Article 6.4, 6.2. So that's important, but we need to get in the next 1.5 years to the solution for the application of concrete activities, and CI-ACA plays certainly in the capacity building set. We have heard 1 hour before in the other room when the capacity building program or the first survey and consultations on the region have been presented. That is also a very important point. And when we get into concrete measures for capacity building, I think CI-ACA has a word to say on this, what could be expanded and how it could be expanded. So my last aspect is to tell a little bit about what is Germany doing. Germany is, as part of the EU, without international obligations for markets. So that's the point. We have defined a neutrality target for 2050 without international certificates. So many people are asking why you are engaging from the German side for Article 6 and on voluntary car markets. That's the point. It's very clear. We would like to see the acceleration of ambition, and that means without offsetting our obligations, we can support Article 6. And this is an important understanding we have also to learn at a political level. Normally people think, okay, from the Kyoto times we take the offset to save money in Europe. So we have to define that we have our obligations to come to net zero and to engage internationally. And this at the end means not we have a quota where we use Article 6 certificates, but we use money for capacity building to enable also new mitigation outcomes, even if you say this is for us maybe result-based carbon financing under climate finance. And why not letting these certificates in the host country? So what we would like to see then is, of course, that these certificates will be not traded. That would be stupid not to use it by our own and then let others trade. It's not really a good idea, but to identify ambitious activities in host countries, do it with climate finance on the Article 6 basis, that we could ensure that results are really achieved, and this is measurable. So for this climate finance action, we have the mandate now in our ministry to bring it together, Article 6 and climate finance. This is new. It's said since Paris that it's a good idea, but now we have to do it in programs and to make it operational. And I think the question is clear that we also need the understanding of host countries where they see the need for international cooperation, and that the question is a little bit easier because we can say that ambitious NDC policies can be addressed. So it is the question that additionality can be defined differently for the markets directly. When you are going to trade, then you have your baselines, etc. But for the climate finance corporation, maybe the story it's a little bit different. You have to ensure that it's that there's ambition in the NDC or ambition outside the NDC. That's not the point. The activity must be good and, of course, certainly fulfill quality criteria, and then you can finance governance, especially this is easy when you don't make use of the mitigation outcomes in the sense of ITMOs. So Germany has to tell a little bit a different story to countries like Switzerland, Norway, or Japan, because we have no special target to fulfill. That is good. On the concrete side, and then I stop, not to be too lengthy, we have old activities from the CDM time. We are now redefining what they have to do. We have a project with the GIZ where we have a global market activity, and we are staying in a few countries, traditionally in India, in North Africa we have been, in Brasilia we have been, in China. So you see that maybe the country portfolio have to shift to other countries too. So that will be the case. And we have since a long time supported corporations from the alliances in Africa and more newly in the East Caribbean. So I think this is a good idea that the self-organization of this region could be supported, and so we can define better what is the knowledge we have to support, and it could be shared directly. So this will be one way. We have it also discussed under the capacity building questions of the Secretariat. I think many have mentioned this importance to have regional cooperation, maybe also for the capacity building regional clustering. GEPRO from the LDC said this. I think we have a lot to discuss in concrete terms, and we are just starting a project where we also waited for a long time to start, where we would like to support 4 different countries on their way to come to an inclusive process of their NDC and long-term strategy, to define areas of cooperation and maybe find the first mitigation activities. It's Pakistan, it's Thailand, it's Zambia, and it's Colombia. So this is a special project for 4 to 5 years, where we would like to share our products with others. That's the outreach component. It's clearly one part of these things, and we have not to go in the same speed. The speed is depending on the speed of the country, and also the needs are absolutely different. That was the idea, that it makes more sense to share this knowledge. And because we have waited for a longer time, Hadika knows this, to start, we have seen that other capacity building activities or programs have produced products which are useful also for us, so that we have not to invent everything new, but we can take of advantage from certain products, so that it's important also to get a rational basis for decision making in the host countries. These are 2 things. The first, the strategy in the host country. Second, you need an economic analysis, what you really do with international cooperation partners, especially when you have to calculate the opportunity cost for your government, for your society. This has to be a little bit more worked out, a bit less complicated as an academic exercise by the World Bank, but this is a basis for us also, and it's good that such papers are there. So this is one of the important activities. Other things are also necessary. We are trying to get support for the methodologies. It's not only about using methodologies from the CDM, it's the update under the alignment conditions of the Paris Agreement. And I hope we can make progress at the SB, and the new MES panel installed there can take up preparatory work of different groups, and that's important, that we have not to wait after we get the decision next year finally done for the methodological processes. Maybe we can accelerate there so that it's not so far away the market. And I stop here. I was too long. Sorry for this.
Thank you, Thomas, for your very rich intervention, and allow me also to express all our appreciation for the support provided over the years by the German government, which has made it possible to undertake also so many support activities. Next, we will hear from national policy experts from supported countries to hear about various CI-ACA supported activities which have been conducted over the last 2 years. The activities represent different steps in approaching carbon pricing, from an initial consideration of carbon pricing to an in-depth evaluation of what would happen if carbon were priced in a country, to strategies conducive to the adoption of carbon pricing also. Without waiting any longer, allow me to call our first national policy expert to take the floor to present his experience, Mr. DIAGNE. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon, colleagues. I will try to be very short and allow time to exchange experience, questions that I think will be very important. As said, I will present what has been done in Senegal in relation to carbon pricing. Because as you know, it's a very new topic in West Africa, in Africa in general, and mainly in West Africa, because as developing country haven't commitments in terms of emission reduction under the UNFCCC. Many of them haven't explored these carbon pricing instruments, because they were just invited to fulfill a low development strategy, but they don't have binding commitments under the UNFCCC. So it's why only developed countries have developed very diverse instruments in relation to carbon pricing. Some African countries also, but some African countries were involved in this carbon market in relation to the CDM or these KP mechanisms. But none of them have developed carbon pricing instruments. It started with South Africa just some years ago, and they are in the stage of implementing that carbon tax. What happened and why those African countries suddenly are thinking about this instrument? Because in the Paris Agreement, now we have commitments. All countries have a commitment in terms of emission reductions. And to implement those emission reductions, it will not be the government that will develop programs or develop the economy. They are the economical actors, the private sector, NGOs, other actors that will be on the ground and developing these activities that can generate emission reduction. But for that, we will need also policy from the government to provide the orientation that is needed to be taken, because the commitment at the level of the nationally the determined contribution was made by the government, who is responsible to report on the achievements. So it's when those countries have submitted their NDC, they are starting to think about the different strategies that are available to implement the measures that are in their nationally determined contributions. And by that way, some countries have started to explore the carbon pricing, because as said by Masamba, it's one of the best instrument, that most effective instrument in achieving emission reduction that have been experienced by many countries, and it's an economic reality that it's one of the most effective instruments to achieve emission reduction. And it's why some countries like Cote d'Ivoire, like Ghana, Senegal, and South Africa also, and in East Africa also, one or two, but not many, started to explore those avenues. And I will present very quickly the experience we had in Senegal, because Senegal have had an NDC submitted first an INDC in 2015 and an NDC in 2020. And in that NDC, we have some commitments in terms of in mitigation. It's not absolute emission reduction, but it's a deviation from a business as usual, because many developing countries consider that their emission will continue to grow. And the effort that will be made as a contribution is having a less growth than what is expected if nothing is done. It's what we consider this business as usual. And Senegal's commitment is to be 5% below that business as usual in 2015. And many African countries also, and developing countries and African countries, have two types of commitments. One which is unconditional, they will realize in any case based on their own resource, and they have conditional NDCs. They can go below if they benefit from the international community in terms of finance, capacity building, and technology, or whatever. The NDC of Senegal, as I said, is 5% in 2025 and 7% in 2015. Below the business as usual. But when it comes to the conditional one, it can go from 20 to 27 if we benefit from the global community in terms of finance, technology, transfer, or capacity building. And to achieve that, and it's not an economy-wide commitment, because I present it as an economy-wide, but we have in the commitment, in the NDC, sectorial commitment. We have an NDC in each sector, in the energy sector, the industry sector, the AFOLU sector, as well as in the West sector. So, but the commitment itself is sectorial NDC. And to achieve that, as I said, we were exploring different ways to achieve the objective. And one of the instruments that can be used can be an economic and carbon pricing instrument. And we approach the CI-ACA, and they provide support to start the initial study to explore the feasibility of implementing carbon pricing instrument in Senegal to achieve our NDC. And in the first phase, that was that feasibility study, we had very inclusive and large consultation within the country with government representatives, private sector representatives, NGO, civil society, all actors to see what can be done. And we have had already identified the sectors that can be in a situation and have the environment to support some carbon pricing instruments. And we did a SWOT study with the different stakeholders, first to identify in what sector the carbon pricing can be applied. What are the carbon pricing instrument? What sector and what instrument? And also, we, for the instruments, we started with a carbon tax, an ETS, or having a fiscal reform. We explore those three instruments through all sectors, and we do a selection of sectors. At the end of the day, we selected with all the stakeholders through this very inclusive consultation with some technical tools. We selected 3 sectors: the energy sector, and mainly within the energy sector, the electricity generation, the subsector of the energy sector, this energy generation for very big power plants, only those ones in the energy sector. The second, in the energy sector, we took the production of oil and gas, because we have discovered oil and gas in Senegal and just started the production of oil and gas. And we have there also some big actors. The second one was the industry sector. And within the industry sector, we only choose the cement sector, where we have 4 main actors. And lastly, we choose the waste sector. Why? Because we wanted not to have a very large dissemination of actors. We selected, just to start with that, with some sectors, very well organized, where the reporting can be done, the MRV can be done in those sectors, and see what can be done in those sectors. After that selections, we went through a very large consultative process. We started a second round of studies to see now what will be the economic impact of the application of those taxes in those sectors in all the economy. That was the second phase. That was ongoing, that we already completed some months ago, to see what will be the impact in the GDP, impact in the labors, in the well-being of the different population, in jobs, and many, all those assessments. And based on that, at the same time, we do awareness across all actors, private sector, governments, because we face many reluctance coming from the private sector, but also from the government side. Because we, in some proposals, how the revenue will be used from those tax, because we explore all these instruments, but the instrument we have selected in the first phase will be the tax, carbon tax only, not emission trading, nor fiscal reform. We choose the carbon tax with the usage of the revenue in the same sector to incentivize actors that are in the sectors where the tax is delivered. That was the findings we had after conducting all of that. So we'll have some reluctance from the Ministry of Finance, saying why the revenue will go back in the sectors where you apply the tax. We have just one ministry. We can use the revenue as well as we want. While the actors may accept the tax if there are some feedback in that sector to support them in developing the sectors. So that are what we have found. We have conducted also that economic modeling to see the impact across all sectors and have some findings. And at the same time, as I said, we are trying now to develop a tool and materials to buy all those outcomes to the different actors, governments as well as different other actors. And we are at that stage. And we need some additional, because we have tested many levels of tax and the implication of the level of those tax in the emission reduction of the concerned sectors. Now we are trying to conduct additional studies before being able to implement it. I'll stop there and be able and open for any question for interaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbaye, for this very rich and interesting intervention. Next, I would like to call Ms. Hadika Jamshaid to present us on the experience in developing a carbon pricing communication strategy for Pakistan. Pakistan is a country which the CI-ACA project started supporting as early as 2017. I will put on the screen the presentation now, and
Thank you, Nicholas, and thank you everyone for your informative interventions. And it was really, I won't be repeating a lot of things because I think Pakistan did a lot of things similar to Senegal. We were part of the same CI-ACA project under UNFCCC. We started a study on exploring the carbon pricing instruments which are the best for Pakistan. And after the study, we had several consultative sessions with our provinces and with the relevant stakeholders, which include ministries and line ministries and the provincial departments. And during that, we established a committee for establishing a carbon market in Pakistan. And there were certain deliverables we were focusing on. And parallelly, at that time, we were also in the phase of revising our NDCs. Back in 2019, we started the process. We submitted into 2021. And just to give you a background of that, the first NDC which was submitted by Pakistan into 2016, we had a target of 20% of reduction of emission, but all of that reduction was conditional, and there was no mention of carbon pricing instrument as part of achieving the goal. But in the revised NDCs, we have enhanced the target to 50%, which include 15% unconditional target and 35% conditional target, and it does include carbon market as one of the most significant instruments to achieve the goals of NDCs. At the same time, we were revising the national climate change policy of Pakistan, and carbon pricing was integrated into that. The research we did with UNFCCC had these outcomes, which Ministry of Climate Change and the government of Pakistan were able to include them in the policy making session, policy making of future, and also to take this agenda on the table of the policymakers and also for the government to how to move forward. And very specifically to my presentation, just to give, this was just the background, but the presentation was, when the committee was established, there were certain deliverables, and one of them was to establish a carbon pricing communication strategy. While we were conducting the study, we realized that most of the stakeholders we met, including the line ministries, planning and development, economic affairs, finance, they lacked the whole concept and they lacked the understanding of carbon markets, and B, they have these misconceptions, which was also true part for Pakistan, where 25% of the population is living below the poverty line. The other concerns are bigger than climate change. We are low emitter. We emit less than 1% of the emission of the world. Our main priority lies with adaptation. So the main resistance we got from most of the policymakers is that why do Pakistan want to get into this? Because our main target is adaptation, and reducing of emission should not be that of a priority for Pakistan. So realizing that gap and realizing how it will impact economically, how it will impact the disproportionate population of Pakistan, who is already vulnerable. We are the most vulnerable country for the last 20 years, consistently with Haiti, according to the German Watch. So all these issues came up, and realizing that, we decided to have a communication strategy before we get into the ground. Parallelly with other issues, as you mentioned about MRV system, there was lack of data. We don't have political buy-in from the provinces who will be actually implementing them, because they have the full autonomy of these projects. All that, but the communication remains one of the major barrier, and one of the areas we wanted to intervene and to have a good communication strategy, so that we know our audience, and we know how to, when you talk to them, you don't give them incentives, they don't listen to you. So you have to give them incentive in a way. You have to talk in their language, which they understand and they are interested in. For planning and development, you talk about finance, you talk about how much revenue you can generate, rather than about how much emission you will reduce out of this. Or with provinces, you talk about the air pollution issues they are facing, which are quite significant in Pakistan, especially some provinces where there's a severe issue of smog in winters. So they do listen to those issues which are on their priority. So yeah, so this is just a background of how we how this whole process started. And with CI-ACA, we finished the study. They were supporting in gathering more finances and in moving forward, and parallelly they were supporting developing a communication strategy of Pakistan. Thank you so much. This is the process we followed. We looked into the national policies, national documents, and the literature available, which was very it's not a topic which most of the people understand in Pakistan. It's still we still need to explore a lot. There's only one study we have done under the CDM, under Kyoto Protocol. Pakistan kind of missed the opportunity. They came in late when the business was almost down. But this time with Article 6, we want to be prepared well, so that we take the better advantage of it as well, and to be able to contribute to the global reduction of emission. And because of the lack of literature available, we did a lot of interviews. We interviewed all the line ministries, we interviewed all the relevant stakeholders, we interviewed some academia as well, we interviewed the private sector, including the think tanks, NGOs, to get their perception and to understand how they are seeing this whole initiative coming forward in Pakistan. And on the basis of that, we developed the policy report. The main analysis we did was to understand the national circumstances, and there were four elements we looked at. One was on the political factors and also on the policy factors. It's very important to have alignment, as I mentioned before, between the province ministries, because Ministry of Climate Change, let alone, cannot move forward if they don't have support of Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance. So that was something which we did an analysis on. We conducted interviews to see how we can move forward collectively, and also with the provinces. And the major thing we figured out that you need to involve all the provinces, all the relevant stakeholders at an early stage, because the more you move forward alone, the more resistance they have contributing or giving ownership to these kind of policy recommendations. And also different parties, as we have very significant political parties, and it's remained one of the political concerns as well. And we also have a very disputed government where there's not one party ruling Pakistan. There are different provinces, different parties. So we have to make sure that we don't follow one of the party's ideology, to make it more holistic and comprehensive. And whichever party is in the rule, they are in favor of that. So those areas were identified. NDCs were looked into because there's a lot of focus on green economy, green jobs, focus on to reduce the air pollution, to have a green recovery. So all those areas were looked into, and to understand the circumstances of Pakistan. Economic factor, as I mentioned before, remains one of the biggest factor. As mentioned, a lot of people are living below poverty line. We have a lot of energy issues, shortfalls. So people are just finding hard to meet their means, the basic necessities. So you have to make sure that if you're implementing a carbon pricing, you're not impacting the disproportionate population, where most of the income goes into meeting these means and the commodities. So how you're going to deal with that, what's the circumstance now, and how you're going to develop policy and communicate to them in a way, as Thomas has mentioned before as well, that if you are if you're putting a tax on some product, then there should be a complementary policy so that those people are not affected and their income enhances in a way, or income tax reduces in a way, so that they are not affected directly. And then public perception plays another important role, and that was something we did an analysis on. And as mentioned, that it's we talk about reduction, you talk about mitigation of climate change. People are more of a view that we need to focus on adaptation. That is also true. But seeing the issues, there's a heat wave going on currently in Pakistan, which is severe. There are forest fires, which we are facing at this moment. So there was a GLOF, a glacier outburst, lake a month ago in the region of northern area. We lost a lot economically. We lost lives, we lost livelihoods and the land. So all those things are also true for Pakistan. We need to focus on adaptation, but then again, we need to focus on mitigation as well. As we are a growing economy, we are not at a stage where we have to change a lot of things. We might have to change the way we are growing in a better way. So all these were taken into consideration, and the analysis was done on the basis consequences of that. And the other area we focused on developing this communication strategy was to look at the best practices of the world and to see what Pakistan can learn from these countries and how we can, tweak in a way or customize it in a way so that Pakistan can get benefit. Because you cannot use the same instrument in a different country, because there's a lot of other elements involved. The circumstances are different, politically, economically, and also socially. So some of the best practices, as mentioned on the slide, is to communication should map and classify audience and cover a broad range of audience. So you don't have to just focus on some of the line ministries, but you have to focus on a broad audience, because it will be impacting a very significant part of the economy. The communication needs to be two-way so that it can be changed as per the demand of the people who are part of this whole process. Communication, you need to know your audience and you need to know the channels. Before we were using, steering committees or to have some kind of consultative sessions, but it was kind of a one-way, because we used to present and give the information, but most of the time for them to give their feedback was a missing part. So that was analyzed, how we are developing policy, how we were working on carbon pricing. So this was also one of the recommendations. And communication should have the narrative. It's very important. And it's simple language, because the jargons we have been using, we are sitting over here, I can use that additionality or corresponding adjustments as simple jargons, but when we are meeting our local partners or meeting the provinces, they don't really understand those kind of things. So most of the provinces don't even understand what NDCs are. They are more, they understand climate change policy more than NDCs. So using it more separate jargons than to using it in a collective way. Like when we talk about climate change policy, at the government, at the federal level, we know we have to report back to UNFCCC on NDCs, but when we talk to them, we talk about climate change issues, climate change action. So that was also very important. This was a stakeholder mapping we have stakeholder mapping we did to see who can influence this whole process more, and who are in the support of it as well, and who are not in the support and who has less influence. As you can see from the slide, Ministry of Climate Change remained the most influential and the most supportive of this whole carbon pricing instrument. Then Ministry of Energy, because of a target of achieving 60% of renewables by 2030, which is also an NDC target, which is also a Ministry of Energy target, is an alternative energy policy target. Ministry of Finance, we recently established a climate finance unit in Ministry of Finance. That was a good achievement for Pakistan. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they are the major negotiators when we come to UNFCCC as well, and also when we are going to have a bilateral trading within the countries, they will play a very significant role. Environmental NGOs and organization, renewable energy ministries, Ministry of Commerce and Industries are also they have influence and they are supportive of the process. Just to give you a small example, like textile industry, the exports reduced in few years from the textile industry of Pakistan, which is like a big portion of it, and it shifted to Bangladesh because of the carbon tax, border carbon tax of EU. So all these, they are coming up themselves, and they are interested that they want to intervene into that. And then we have opposition from coal companies, we have opposition from, transportation companies, and so on and so forth. And the other area we focused when we were developing this communication strategy was the vulnerable groups, but plays a significant role. For example, youth associations. Pakistan is a young country. 70% of the population is youth, is below 30. So we need to realize that they are the one who are going to be most impacted, and they are the one in coming years, in 10 years or 5 years, they will be in power. So they need to be really involved in this if you really want to achieve the goals of climate change. And academia and private sector. So the key findings, I've been talking about this throughout the presentation as well, but to really understand, we need to have, as I said, we need to have working groups, we need to have a two-way communication, we need to follow a path where people are more, they feel like it's a collective effort, and they are inclusive, and their opinion matters, so they give more ownership, because let alone Ministry of Climate Change cannot lead this whole path. We really need to have some support from all the sectors of Pakistan. And this is just a start of it, and we are moving towards developing our MRV system. We are, as Senegal has said, these are on pipeline, how the revenue will be used, how it will impact economically, all these researches, and to have a pilot as well. As Thomas has mentioned, we are working with Ministry of Germany under EKI project to identify the long-term strategies, to identify some pilots, but to learn by doing a process as well. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Hadika, for sharing this with us, highlighting Pakistan's effort to integrate the carbon pricing policy narrative in a rich local context. And then we also have with us, we are lucky to have Miss Bianca Changi, who will be sharing from her side from her experience as coordinator of the East African Alliance on her support, dialogue and exchange with countries in the East African region on carbon pricing and carbon markets. The forging of such an alliance was made possible thanks to funding from the CI-ACA project. So we will put your presentation on the screen, and Bianca, then over to you.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Nico has said, my name is Bianca Changi, the coordinator for the Eastern Africa Alliance on Carbon Markets and Climate Finance, and I'll be taking you through the Alliance today. So just to give a bit of background, we know that countries in the Eastern Africa region participated in market activities under the Kyoto Protocol, so this was CDM, but we know that these activities were developed late and benefits were low in different aspects. So for example, when you think of geographical distribution of units, the issuance was very low. But a lot of Eastern African countries now have referred to the intended use of Article 6 in their NDCs, and for those that have also revised, there's a reference to it. So there is a need to participate and shape and readiness for this new generation of carbon markets that's coming in and access new carbon finance. So this requires a lot more clarification and capacity to implement these cooperative approaches and to participate in the new mechanism under 6.4 of the Article 6. So this alliance was formed to address this issue, and the membership comprises of countries in the region, which is Burundi, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, and Sudan. So more on the alliance, it was formed to address this issue of participating in carbon markets long term and to make sure that the countries can benefit. So it's very country driven in the sense that the activities are all based on requests that are put in from the countries themselves. And each of the countries have a nominated focal point that they put forward to take part in alliance activities. And all these activities constitute a work plan, which has been the basis of all our work since we were formed. And we are hosted by the UNFCCC Regional Collaboration Center in Kampala, which is also based at the East Africa Development Bank. And we are supported through Bmwk, through GIZ for our various activities, and of course the CI-ACA initiative administratively. So the Alliance works to enhance Article 6 implementation. Of course, before the decision, this was a lot of readiness, but now we're looking to actually support implementation through different capacity building initiatives that I'll go through. And we do also support active and well-coordinated participation of delegates, rather than negotiators, at the UNFCCC negotiations, so such as this, the SBs and the COP, of course. And because it's a regional alliance, we do promote a lot of exchange of experiences and lessons learned relating to carbon pricing, so on issues carbon markets, but also carbon tax. So then what has been the outcome over this past couple of years? So we have undertaken quite a few trainings. So we do a lot of pre-negotiation trainings. We've done a lot of pre-COP work. This year we started with pre-SB negotiation training for the negotiators, covering all the agenda items, making sure all the issues, the key issues are understood before they come, and of course enabling them to be able to form their country positions. So we've also developed a handbook for negotiators, which helps simplify this jargon. As mentioned earlier, Article 6 can have quite a few, many terms that can be complicated, so we do demystify this. And we also realize that the private sector is very key to actually implementing these activities in the region. So we facilitate private sector dialogues and workshops, which we've been doing over the past couple of years, to update them on what's happening in Article 6, but to also understand what their concerns are, to realize how we can get this relationship between government and private sector to be a lot stronger this time around with the new market mechanisms. We have done carbon market profiles on all the countries just so that they can understand where they are before they embark on Article 6 or what has been happening, and to learn from past experience. We have also had very specific country requests, such as trainings for specific groups. We had one particularly for the youth. We had one requested by Kenya. We had one specifically in Sudan for the private sector and public sector as well. Uganda requested for very specific workshops for country position development for Article 6, and Rwanda also requested one on climate finance. And of course, through all these activities, the RCC does provide a lot of technical capacity support for these activities. So moving, because we know there are quite a few instruments you can use for carbon pricing, that's a lot of work on carbon markets, but we also have touched a bit on carbon taxation, where we developed an online carbon tax course with a lot of collaboration. I'll go into a bit more detail. And from that, we also made an additional module that we collaborated with the World Bank to now incorporate in their already existing carbon tax course. We do a lot of peer-to-peer learning through roundtable sessions. We have the Africa Climate Week, where we collaborate with the West Africa Alliance a lot. We have webinars and regional workshops, such as with CPLC, and we do participate in the Innovate for Climate sessions. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, so now just to, just to give a bit more focus on the CI-ACA supported activities that we've done. As I mentioned earlier, we had a carbon taxation course, and this had financial support from CI-ACA and BOAD, the West African Development Bank. And it was quite a huge collaborative effort, because we had technical support from the RCCs, not only Kampala, but Lome and St. George's. And we also collaborated with St. George's University, who were really happy to help us host the course materials on their SGUX platform for free. And it was an online lecture facilitated course held from March over the course of 3 weeks, targeting a lot of public sector officials. When we consolidated the participants, we had about 75 participants coming in, majority public sector officials, but also a few observer organizations. And then we had expert speakers, African guest speakers, to also give their insights. So for the examples of Senegal, South Africa, and this was something that was really appreciated by the public sector participants. So based on that intensive online lecture course, that's where we had additional support now from GIZ to compile that into an Africa-centric module, which we added to the World Bank course that they have on carbon taxation, because we realized Africa has very, very different circumstances and situations to developing countries and how they develop a carbon tax. So that's also available on their platform now. Yes, and thank you very much. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Bianca, for this presentation, which just goes to show how regional collaboration can foster higher mobilization of stakeholders. Thanks for showcasing some of the great achievements of the Alliance. And ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for our moderated discussion with our panelists here. In addition to our presenters, we also have Mr. Mubarak Mukaila, team lead at the Regional Collaboration Center in Lome, joining us for this moderated discussion. So without further waiting, and before we take some of your questions, I'm just going to submit to you 3 questions as kind of an icebreaker to get the discussion going. And so let me start with them. Which remain the major obstacles to the adoption and consideration of carbon pricing in developing countries? Which remain the major obstacles? Question 2, which type of support, in your experience of course, which type of support is the most effective for countries? So in relation to carbon pricing. And my third question will be how to ensure that knowledge and expertise is made truly available to countries.
Thank you very much, Nico. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Before I start, I would like to thank the government for the support provided to both the West African Alliance and the East African Alliance on this process. Also thank all the partners that spoke. Before I start, I would just like to share something that a young participant from the workshop that we did in Nigeria during the carbon pricing workshop came to me after and told me, sir, if I understood well, carbon pricing is just an instrument to meet our engagement and the implementation of the NDCs. And I think this young participant understood quite well what carbon price serves as. So like in the presentations that Mbaye, Hadika and Bianca shared earlier, major obstacles that we faced during this process was we thought it was going to be from the public sector at first, but it was mainly with the stakeholders on at the private sector, and it's very well. We can understand that because in Hadika's example she gave earlier, you saw that some private sector developers, like in the textile industries, for example, left from Pakistan to Bangladesh just because there is an additional tax that is implemented. And that's one of the reasons why in the West African circumstances we are working with together with the West African Commission, the Union Commission, which has all the 8 countries of the West African region, to have a carbon pricing mechanism at the region level, so that it doesn't you don't push out some of the private sector investors in that region to another region. So it's very important that we have that. And another very interesting thing that we saw from Hadga's presentation as well is the communication strategy that you have to have together. And in the West African region as well, in Senegal and other parts of the West Africa, we have this consultative meetings that we do with stakeholders to make sure that we get everyone's voice and everyone's understanding around what's are the best options of instruments that we have to put on the table. In Senegal, for example, we have very many options that were put on the table, but it was decided that they not only will choose specific measures but then for specific sectors, and even within those sectors, there are some industries that we don't want to jeopardize, that are not entitled or are not subject to those taxes. So it's very important that we make those kind of arrangements as well. And in terms of expertise, we make sure that we work with local consultancies, local institutions, so that the expertise is at the regional level. The expertise stays within the country to actually support when the option that is chosen is implemented. So it's very important as well. And like I said earlier, carbon pricing shouldn't be looked as a tax. It should rather be looked as an incentive to mainstream climate finance into projects that private sectors are developing. So it's very important that we have that in mind as well, and we show private sector that by mainstreaming climate finance, by upscaling climate finance projects, it helps not only in the future their sectors, but it also helps the country to meet their national engagements as well. So those are the very key points that I can bring, and I am happy to start now with a discussion from the audience. If there are any questions, we will be happy to address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mubarak. So I will take just a round of interventions from the panelists, but please be short, be very mindful of the time, as we don't have much time available. And then we'll take questions from the audience. So, dear panelists, the floor is open to you.
I will be very quick, just to allow for questions. Just to tackle on what was said by Mubarak. We have one of the main outcome we got from the consultation as a starting point is just having a lower tax, starting with that. And based on that, trying to build all the infrastructure in terms of MRV system from the government side as well as from the other stakeholder side. And without not a lot of impact, whether in the emission, but also in the different prices. Not to be having the impact of that tax being supported by the consumer, for example. In a second hand, also, we had this issue of this regional implication, because we have a regional area in West Africa where we have free trading within that region. If a country apply a tax and not another one, that can be disincentive for the countries for entities that are in our country. And lastly, we were looking also within the government to see how we can transpose existing tax into a carbon tax instead of bringing new taxes. We took the global taxation as something global and not increasing the global level of the tax, but having inside this global level of the tax, this carbon tax as one of them. We were exploring all those avenues because we had very large and inclusive discussion with all stakeholders. And that are something we are now assessing the impact in the different sectors, in the GDP as well as in the emission reduction and health and also well-being of population as well as all of our jobs and all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Massama, for this very, very good and strong reminder that it's really about having the taxes at the right place, really at the right place. That's really what matters, which means on emissions. I know I just take maybe just one or two interventions from panelists, or if there are none, I will leave a bit of room for the audience. We have a microphone that is floating around, so if you have a question, raise your hand. And I know it's a bit late, but we can still try to. We can still try to sneak in one or two questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Going once. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Benja. I'm from ES Netherlands, a student network in agriculture. Thank you all for the presentations. I enjoyed it a lot. I have one question for Ms. Hadika. It's just a knowledge question, because you said that the textile industry was hit by the EU ETS, and how did that shift to Bangladesh, and how did that not also hit Bangladesh? So I was just wondering how that worked, or do you have any insight on that?
Just not giving the specific name of Bangladesh, I just gave an example. But because the product was not carbon offsetted, so because of that, the EU carbon border tax, they need to offset the emissions of the product. So that was something they were struggling with, and that was something they were coming to ministry for help, and as they are getting into the voluntary carbon market now. But that was the main issue. So that was the point was that there was a appetite of carbon market from the textile industry from Pakistan. Yeah.
Thank you.
And to add to from that, to this European carbon tax, if you don't apply the carbon tax in your country, the companies that export into Europe will pay that tax at that level. While if you apply it in your country, they will be at the level of emission that they will not pay the tax there.
Thank you.
Yeah. May I? Yeah, thank you. My name is Edouard. I'm from Cameroon, Central Africa. As you can see, Central Africa is not represented around the table, whereas we are considered as one of the lungs of the planet. But my question is to know what is it to do to apply to CI-ACA in order to support this policy of implementing our policy in Cameroon, in Central Africa, especially our NDC. What is to do to apply? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nico, thank you very much. We actually have a process, an ongoing process. It's because we have, we just started a process that we didn't share the experience we have with Cameroon and the Central African region, but there is an ongoing process within that region. So very soon we will start, and hopefully by Sharm el-Sheikh we will be able to share the experience we have in that region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that we are running over time and we are being asked to vacate the room. So with this, we conclude today's event, and I would like once again to thank all the speakers and panelists who made themselves available. And this is despite a very busy negotiation schedule. So thank you to you all for attending this event, and wishing you a very successful SB 56 here in Bonn. Thank you all.
Thank you.